Welcome to Medical Matters Weekly with Dr. Trey Dobson, presented by Southwestern Vermont Healthcare and Catamount Access Television.
Today is October 5th, and we are recording for an October 12th show. I'm Trey Dobson, Chief Medical Officer at Southwestern Vermont Medical Center and an emergency medicine physician with Dartmouth Health. And this is Medical Matters Weekly, a show about the aspects of healthcare that matter to you most. And my guest today is Cara Richardson-Whiteley. She is an author, advisor, influencer, and lots of other things. Cara, welcome to the show.
My goodness, thank you for having me.
We are excited to talk to you today. She is an author. She has a long bio, which we will put on our website. Just a few things. Wrote the memoir, Gorge, My Journey Up Kilimanjaro at 300 Pounds, which is, incidentally, I am told, being made into a movie, which is exciting. I can't wait to see the movie after interviewing here. She's also partnered with brands such as LL Bean, Columbia, Keen, and contributes to Backpacker Magazine, advises companies such as Pfizer, Google, Uber. Sounds like you are a very busy person, Cara.
Right. Oh, thank you. I think it's important that I speak as much as possible. I'm out in the community as much as possible because I represent the plus size audience, which makes up 67% of women who are size 12 or above.
So where are you right now? You're talking to us. A lot of people, by the way, will actually watch this video, but probably the majority listen to it through a podcast.
Right. I'm based in Summit, New Jersey, but I grew up in Vermont.
In Vermont, tell us about that.
Yeah, I grew up in South Burlington, Vermont. My mom moved there when I was about age 9. I lived, in a condo there. I finished school at South Burlington High School, and so. Just a beautiful place to grow up and to visit as an adult. And one day I will get a house there again.
Great. Yeah, we'd love to have you back here. I'm actually not from Vermont, but I've been here for 15 years and love it. Feel like I'm from Vermont. Before we get into some of the details of what you've done and your movement and your passion, but besides hiking, what else do you do?
Well, of course, I'm a writer. Writing is my passion, and these days, I think the most powerful work that I do is advising clients on how best to connect with the 67% of women who are size 14 and above. That plus size audience has been so ignored for so long, and yet they're such an important part of the market. I don't think it's just good business sense, but it's a good thing to do because so many people feel left out of outdoor spaces. I also serve on the board of directors of Come Alive Outside, which is a Rutland-based nonprofit, which also has the mission of getting more people out into nature. And, because of getting out into nature, it improves their mental and physical well-being, as we all know in Vermont.
I believe we've had your director on our show in the past, or at least we have spoken with her.
Yes.
Well, let's get into it. And by the way, you can take off on my questions here and really talk about what is important, the message you want to get out. But let me just start by saying you've identified the emotional sources for binge eating. And how did that start for you?
Right. So I now know that I have something, or I've lived with something called binge eating disorder. It's actually the most common eating disorder out there. It's more prevalent than anorexia and bulimia combined. And so it started, for me, at least the first memorable binge that I had was when I was 9 years old. My parents were on the verge of divorce, and I distinctly remember hiding in the pantry, and the sounds of chewing would drown out the sounds of their screaming at each other. And, of course I was a kid, and so you're kind of always looking for ways to cope and to deal with things. And so for me, food became this separation between me and something I didn't want to feel. And back then, there wasn't even a diagnosis in the DSM-5. It was just something people talked about it being an issue of willpower and weight. The issue became more and more prevalent for me as I went through life and had even more traumas. I was sexually assaulted when I was 12 years old. And so like any habit, vice, compulsion, it turned into something that was way more than just, again, this isn't something like, I have a few extra snacks from time to time. It was kind of an all-consuming behavior. And so not only did it push away the negative emotions, it really prevented me from enjoying the things that I loved, like hiking. I stopped moving as much, my quality of life was much lower. And so that continued on for decades because, again, when I would share that my frustration with my body, it was always responded with just diet advice, which we now know when you're talking to somebody with an eating disorder may not be the best path forward.
Right. In fact, it's so complex, which we're only going to get into a little bit of that today. But it also, just from an outside, and you've experienced this not only yourself, but in working with others, the judgment that comes from people who think eating's not that big of a deal, but actually it's really complex. And I don't know if you could just talk about some of the roots of that. You already mentioned trauma as an underlying theme.
Right. And I mean, to add more complication, as you mentioned, it is absolutely complicated. I just learned 2 years ago now, I think it was, that I have a condition called lipedema. I never was able to explain, why I carried my weight so much between my navel and my knees. So how come it never goes anywhere? I've climbed Kilimanjaro 3 times. I've hiked 100 miles of the long trail. And yet anytime someone meets me, it's always like, maybe you should eat less sugared beverages. And I'm like, I don't drink sugar beverages. Or cut out the, like I get these comments on Instagram, like cut out the fast food. And it's like, but which ones? That's not, you make people have this narrative, and especially in the health community, in the wellness community, there's often a narrative that goes along with someone's body. And so I've had to, rewrite some of my own narrative and learn, for example, that lipedema, like that's, that has a lot of genetic components, and it has to do with the venous reflux insufficiencies and things that are going on in my body, way more than just calories in, calories out. And so it's really important for the medical community and those people who, seek medical treatment to ask a lot of questions and come to the table without a lot of judgment, because if a patient comes in with something going on, their knee hurting, a sore throat, they shouldn't just be seen as somebody who's heavy and be given a bunch of diet advice. That there may be something else going on, and it's worth asking a lot of questions. I think back to when I was 12. That was the summer I was sexually assaulted, and I put on, I don't like to say numbers because I work in the eating disorder space. And so the amount of weight that I put on that summer, if a child had lost that amount of pounds, they would have been hospitalized immediately. Like, what's happening here? And the end of that summer, I got shingles as a 12-year-old kid. And there weren't any like red flags, like, what is happening with her? Where can we serve her better? What do we need to unpack here to help her be well and to find health? And so again, oftentimes these kinds of things are dismissed. And so, I mean, this is just one small example. The more I speak around the country, I've spoken at Pfizer, at Google, Uber, all sorts of, like Dartmouth University, and I always get people after my conversations just sharing their own experience of medical bias and the challenges that they've had getting the healthcare that they need when they exist in a larger body.
When I think about bias in healthcare, and by the way, that happens to be a topic we talk a lot about on this show, and no one is above 100% bias. So when I think about bias, the first thing that comes to mind is awareness. We have to get the awareness out there, then we can start making actions. Do you think things are better from your perspective and from the clients you work with, or the people you encounter today than they were perhaps when you were 12?
Well, of course, it helps that, eating disorders are being more recognized, and so when it comes to binge eating disorder, I serve as a mental health advocate for Eating Recovery Center. And so I help to bring compassion and understanding about my lived experience with binge eating disorder. So more people are talking about that. More people I'm finding are talking about lipedema and other conditions, and more people are just trying to learn more and listen more instead of just making those assumptions and kind of clinging to biases. So I would like to say that there's hope on this front, but there is a lot more learning to do. I mean, that's why I give talks about body inclusivity. That's why I'm an advocate and for binge, those who've lived with binge eating disorder, and that's also why, I changed my own narrative as, an influencer on Instagram. I'm constantly showing myself doing the things that I love, whether it's hiking or just going on an adventure or traveling with my family. I mean, that's my life. And I want to open the door to so many other people who for so long have believed that's not part of what they deserve.
You started telling part of your story. Let's go into the next. Like, how did you get into hiking, for example?
Well, I think what's important to recognize is that, binging for me was all about pushing away, right? It was all about like, you don't want to feel that it's too white hot at the moment, and let's just, set it aside. And as I was trying to find my own way, I got this adventure travel catalog in the mail, the kind with glossy pictures of Machu Picchu, Kilimanjaro, and the Alps. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to do that when I lose weight. And then I realized, like, gosh, I'm saying that all the time about everything. Like, I'm going to see a doctor when I lose weight. I'm going to get myself a whole new wardrobe when I lose weight. I'll get a haircut and a perm or whatever I wanted when I was like a kid, like when I lose weight.
Right.
And it was always followed by that clause. And I suddenly realized you're waiting all the time for this moment, this magical moment where the light comes on, you have that aha moment and everything changes, but that never happened. And so I decided to shift my focus that, how about I just start doing the things that bring me joy? And as soon as I started to hike, I got this 50 Hikes of New Jersey book because, there's a lot of flat trails here in New Jersey versus where I grew up in Vermont. A lot of good starter trails. And so I started to take on these like 20-minute trails. They're so like flat. I mean, the kind of thing that a preschool class could do. And I was suited up like I was going up Everest, bear bell and all those things. And I realized that as soon as I stepped into the forest again as an adult trying to move forward in my life in a lot of different ways, not just on the trail, but, in healing and wellness and all of those things, that the forest absolutely consumed me. All of a sudden, instead of pushing away, I'm pulling it all in. And so you don't know when you go on a hike, what is to come, right? You could hit mud, you could, run into a bear, you could see someone who's going to say something nasty, you could see somebody who's going to say something nice. But if you keep pushing forward, you're either going to see an amazing view, or you're going to weather a storm, and you're going to just do it under the power of your own feet. And so I realized that being in nature was the exact opposite of binging. It fulfilled me in a completely different way, but it allowed me to let in the fear, let in the anxiety, and push past it. Because, it's not like you can stop in a trail. I didn't have that many days of supplies. I have to keep moving forward. And so the more I hiked, the more I wanted to do it, the more I wanted to do more challenging things. Molehills led to mountains. I took on Camel's Hump, which was something that had left me winded and I had to turn back in college. So I took on that. I went to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and thankfully back up again without the assistance of a mule. And I landed on Kilimanjaro because it was the highest mountain that you could hike to the top of. It's 19,343 feet, where there's half as much oxygen as there is at sea level in the air. It's like climbing the side of the globe where you go from the equator to glaciers. It's 8 days without a shower. So it's not for everybody, but for me, it was the highest mountain that you could hike to the top of. That means no ice axes, no ropes, no supplemental oxygen. And that was next on my list.
Do you remember that day that you decided you were going to do Kilimanjaro? Were you on the sofa looking at magazines? Were you out on a hike? And what was it like?
Gosh, I don't know if I remember the exact
Yeah.
day, but I remember that at the time, because I've climbed Kilimanjaro 3 different times. And the first time actually was after this significant weight loss. And it was the kind of weight loss where everybody was talking about my body. I mean, maybe you've seen this phenomenon at work. Somebody changes the shape of their body and it's like all they can talk about. And I'm thinking to myself that all of a sudden, there's all these people who never looked me in the eye. Now they're holding the door for me. Now they're meeting me up with me in the bathroom, asking me, like, what's your secret? How long does it take you? What did you do to drop all this weight? And I wanted to change and reframe the conversation and be like, well, actually, I'm climbing Kilimanjaro and I'm doing it to raise money for AIDS orphans in Africa. And here's a donation form. And I like to say that to give you an idea of how many questions I got about my weight and my body at the time, well, I raised $12,000 for Global Alliance for Africa. So it was a very effective strategy at the time.
And I know that at least from some of your earlier work, that when you were training for Vermont camel hump in Vermont, you had talked about strength, stamina, and spirit. What are those components, and what do they mean to you?
Right. So there were three things that, for climbing Kilimanjaro or any big hike that I like to focus on. One is strength, making sure the muscles around my joints are super strong and my core is strong. So a lot of strength work. Stamina, so long, long hikes. And spirit was, I would do a lot of yoga, and that's really important for the breath work, especially when you're going to a high altitude place. And I'm not a medical professional, so don't take this as medical advice. But I wanted to make sure that I felt like I was in control of my breath and that my breath wasn't going to be in control of me all the time. And so I would do a lot of like Kundalini yoga with alternate nostril breathing and all these other things that would just help me practice to just refocus, reframe, and have a rhythm to it. But more importantly, in Savasana, that part of yoga where it looks like everybody's laying down and sleeping, I would always imagine myself at the top of Kilimanjaro, long before I ever was there. So there's an important piece to believing that you can do something before you actually get there.
So you've done it 3 times.
Mhm.
What's inspired you to keep going back? You just love it?
Love is an interesting term. I don't know about that, but about a year after I climbed that first time, my next adventure was having a baby. And when I was pregnant, um, I returned to a lot of behaviors that I had before I climbed that first time of binging. And I think it's because I was so focused on the food and the working out that and I knew the narrative, right? I knew like why I may have been led to binging, like why I used binging as a coping mechanism, but I didn't really build a lot of the skills and the techniques. I mean, the real work that needs to be done when it comes to eating disorders, that's building up self-worth, learning skills like how to have difficult conversations, how to check the facts in your own mind, all these things that kind of were swept under the rug while I was focusing on the physicality of my body. And so when I was pregnant, I returned to a lot of binging. I felt such shame and sorrow for like the fact that I was behaving like this in a way. So a lot of my eating was secret. Those people who were asking me all these questions suddenly didn't talk to me. Like it felt like they were all whispering about me. And so in that one pregnancy, I put on more than half of the weight in one pregnancy. And so the second time I climbed Kilimanjaro was almost like, oh, I swear, if I can just get back to that place, of climbing the mountain. And I thought it was about, climbing for hiking for a cause that was bigger than myself. I thought it was all these things. And so I tried all these challenges for charity, and I ended the year with another Kilimanjaro climb. And spoiler alert, because again, I didn't do that work, that emotional work with an eating disorder specialist. Not much changed. And I even binged the night before that climb. And so that climb went horribly wrong. It's like a cautionary tale of what not to do on Kilimanjaro.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought after that hike, and while I made it to summit night and I did relatively well, I didn't actually summit that second time. I came back defeated. I thought I was never going to hike again. I thought, like, this is it. This is it. I'm not meant to do this.
Yeah.
And so there was a good year and a half where I didn't hike. And I finally, there was a friend and a relative who wanted to climb Kilimanjaro, and a total of 3 people promised that they would hike the mountain. And if I hiked with them, together we would raise more than $30,000 for Global Lines for Africa, the organization that I had climbed for before. And that's enough to build a library in Kenya. So
Wow.
I thought to myself, well, how can I say no, right? How can I say no to climbing one last time and finish on top? But I decided to flip the narrative and say, well, how can I say yes? How can I change this relationship with hiking in my body? I can't keep looking at myself like a before and after picture. You have to remember, I have to remember that hiking is about bringing in joy and bringing in challenge and bringing in all the things of life that are important. And so I decided to train hard, like I did the Mad Marathon in Waitsfield. I walked it. I'm sorry, Mad Half Marathon in Waitsfield. I walked it. I did a boot camp, but it wasn't about pounds on the scale. It was all about how can I be strong and successful on the mountain. And so that was really an important part of my training. And so, while I'm not going to, you have to read Gorge to find out how it really went, but just know that Hollywood is typically only interested in a story if it has a good ending.
Right.
So, it was all about, it wasn't about that before and after picture. It was about loving yourself, loving myself where I am and going from there, instead of, all of these initiatives with my body and wellness and weight were all about how much I hate my body. And instead, how about it being led in a direction of love? I did love hiking. I did love the outdoors. I never felt so much joy and exhilaration as I did. And so I remembered that spirit, and that's what carried me forward.
I'm certain that many people in our audience, either themselves or a close friend or someone they know, is in a position that is similar to where you found yourself back when you were 12 and older. So I know you get this question every time you speak with people, but what types of advice, what do you think about, what do you tell people, recognizing, like you said, you're not in a medical profession, but you certainly have that experience, and in fact are in a better position to talk to people than many professionals are in this topic. So I'll just stop there and ask, what do you tell people?
That's a great question, because I think where sometimes the focus is in the wrong place. So sometimes maybe somebody might be in a larger body, and the focus is not about the weight, it's about the behavior. If you notice that someone that you love is doing something secretly, is avoiding things, that's where the focus should be, is on the behavior. Like suddenly they're withdrawn from their job, from their family, from things that they love doing. That's when that maybe they might need some assistance. And a lot of times people ask, like, what could have been helpful as a kid? And I don't think it was, because I did sports. I actually did soccer and basketball, and I was pretty active. But I think that maybe somebody who was interested or talking to me and helping me process things at the time. And when I was a new mom, it would be someone who would stop by and just ask, are you okay? Is everything going all right? And kind of push a couple levels deeper and make sure that you have resources or ways to help with simple tasks. Because one of the things about binge eating disorder is that oftentimes people present and like they're really able to, they're highly functioning. That's the word I'm looking for. And so it's not like this, sometimes, when you think about anorexia and bulimia, sometimes it's just this death defying, like it's like you must go to treatment or, things are not going to end well. And so oftentimes with binge eating disorder, while thoughts are consumed with food and body and things like that, they're functioning, but not well. And so I had a job, I took the recycling out, but I was really, really struggling internally and hiding it really well. And so sometimes it takes that level of like, are you okay? How can I help? Let me take care of this for you. That's the start of a conversation of wellness. And then, of course, if you really suspect something's going on, is directing them to medical professionals who can help to make a diagnosis or at least get them the support that they need.
In addition to those medical professionals, I'm kind of going off cue here, which is very important because there's some serious health things that may need to be addressed on the acute term, on the near term. But as far as the longer time patterns, what other resources have you found to be useful? In other words, groups, societies, and others. You mentioned one in Rutland.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Come Alive Outside is an incredible group, especially if you just want to get outdoors and have like some incentives. So they have mile a day programs. They have Nature RX for physicians who feel like some of the people that they work with could use some more nature in their lives. So that's an incredible organization to connect with. Again, that's Come Alive Outside. For those people who are looking for additional support, Eating Recovery Center has some free online support groups, which are really great, and some are binge eating disorder specific, which is wonderful. I run a Facebook group called Binge Eating Connections. So again, if binge eating is the thing that you're thinking that maybe this might be an issue for you or someone you love, it might be a nice resource for you. But in my own life, in the day-to-day, right? Because it's not all about that. I try to make sure that I'm fitting in wellness that makes me feel good about myself. I love my Peloton, not always because of where I fit in on the leaderboard, but also like the kind of messages that the instructors are telling me. Sometimes I did a body inclusive forum for Peloton, and I said to them that sometimes I don't show up for a ride, I show up for a pep talk. And so you got to find those kinds of things in your life that make you feel like you're worth, that you deserve the things that you love. And whether it's finding a squad like Arwen Turner, who's the executive director of Come Alive Outside, is one of the people who I love to adventure with, or Myrna Valerio, who's also an influencer. These are my Vermont people that I love to go out and do things with. So find community, find meetups with people who love to do what you love to do, and find ways to bring more joy in your life.
And you do deserve it. I think that is such a message. Like you said, probably initially, and you've gone through phases where you don't even get out because you think you don't deserve that, and you do. What are you looking forward to as we wrap up here? What are you looking forward to personally and professionally over the next couple of years?
Oh, that's a great question. I am looking forward to, in the summer of 2023, I am training for the Tour de Mont Blanc, which I think is a nice balance of hiking and also staying at inns.
Yes.
Unlike, I was saying about previously about hiking the long trail. I did 100 miles of it in 2020, and maybe I'm a little old for sleeping on the ground. And then professionally, of course, is helping to serve more organizations and companies with connecting with that plus size audience, because I really feel like this is a place for authentic growth. If you think about it, those companies who aren't using body inclusive tactics are competing for the same 33% of the market. If 67% of the market is over a size 14, and you don't have any images of them internally of your company reflecting your workforce or those who you want to recruit, or externally with the customers that you want to attract, and way beyond apparel, then you're really not doing a great job of connecting. And that's what I hope for all of us, is to have better connections with the things that they love, the things that you want to do, and where you want to go.
Yeah, I may even take a little more risk and go a little further and say, not only are you missing out at 67%, you're contributing to the judgment and bias that exists in society. Cara Richardson Whiteley, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
It was absolutely a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I also thank Mike Cutler from CAT TV, Ray Smith from Southwestern Vermont Healthcare, and Ashley Jowett from Southwestern Vermont Healthcare. I'm Trey Dobson. Go out and find joy in everything you do, even in the face of adversity, and we will see you again next week.